ever broken the law? Don't show of hands, but you ever had that moment in your life when you look at the law, you look at the rules and you think, nah, that's not for me today? Have you ever been a rebel? I've shared this story before, but I went through a kind of rebellious year when I was 12 years old. My family moved house when I was 12. We moved a long way away. This is all sort of, pre-internet and being able to keep up with anyone. We moved a long way away and I lost all of my friends overnight. I started a new school at the beginning of year 7. I knew no one and I was just desperate to fit in and to have friends. And so when a few kids in the school, kids that I didn't really know that well, when a few kids asked me if I would like to join them badging cars, I thought this was my in. I thought this was my way to be cool and this was my way to be accepted. And so I said yes, and I thought I was in. For those who don't know, that meant that we spent the weekends going for a walk with our friends, which was a bag and a screwdriver, stealing the badges off cars. And if you could get a Ford, that was okay. If you could get a Holden, that was better. If you could get anything European, that was a big deal. And I thought I was in. I thought I was cool until we all got arrested. And it wasn't so cool right then, okay? But I wonder, have you ever been a rebel? Maybe you have a story like mine of, breaking the law at some point in your life. Maybe you had a season where you were causing trouble at school. Maybe you went through a season where you were giving your parents a really hard time. And at least 2 of my children should be nodding at this point in their lives. Yeah. One's honest. I'll talk to you later. Right. Maybe it's not. I'm serious, maybe it's not you. Maybe you're a parent. I'm kind of joking, but maybe you're a parent, and this is bringing back memories of a season when you had to deal with a rebellious child. Maybe you've had family and friends, and you've walked alongside someone as they've been in a season of kind of their own rebellion, and you've helped them sort of track through that. We're in part 4 of a series that we're calling Jesus the Eras Tour. It's a series kind of tongue-in-cheek, inspired by Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. I say each week it's the biggest concert tour in the history of the world. 149 concerts across 5 continents, 2 years. Over 10 million people saw the shows live. Millions and millions more have watched snippets online and whatever. Ticket sales of over $2 billion. It just is... it's crazy. And the point of the tour, and it was called the Eras Tour because Taylor Swift took her entire musical journey and put it into one show. And it was called the Eras Tour because the concert was broken up into different eras, different sections, with each era or section representing one album through her musical career. So in the lead up to Easter, we thought we would look at the eras or the sections or the phases of Jesus' life. In the same way that Taylor Swift sort of took a journey through her musical life, we're kind of saying, okay, can we take a journey through Jesus' life and look at all the different eras, all the different aspects that make up who Jesus is? And we've said the point of all this is for us to discover more of who Jesus is. And if you're a Christian, if you're not yet a Christian, everyone kind of knows that when it comes to Christianity, Jesus is like the guy, okay? He's the founder, he's the hero, he's the central character in all of the stories, he's the loudest voice and the biggest personality in Jesus. But in this series we're asking, how well do we really know Jesus? I mean, maybe you've heard some of the stories, maybe you can even kind of remember some of the quotes, a couple of classic things that he said. What we're saying in this series is that if you're going to follow Jesus, even if you're just considering following Jesus, you should know what you're getting yourself into. Right? You should know what this guy is really all about. And this series is about sort of digging in to who Jesus was, looking at the different eras, the different aspects of who he was. And the hope is that if you're a person exploring Christianity, this will sort of help you make that decision. If you're a person who's already a Christian, who's already a follower of Jesus, that this will help you understand a little bit more the Jesus that you follow. So we kicked off the series in the first week, almost a month ago, talking about Jesus the Messiah. And we said that the Messiah is the most important of all of the eras in Jesus' life. All the other areas that we've been talking about and that we're going to talk about really flow out of this idea that Jesus is Messiah. And I've said this each week, if you haven't seen, good to catch up on all the messages, but if you haven't seen that first message, Jesus Messiah, I really encourage you to go catch up on that. It will certainly, even today, it will make today make a whole lot more sense to kind of get your mind around Jesus Messiah. Because Messiah is not a word we use. Messiah is an ancient Hebrew word that the ancient people used to describe the special, unique, chosen person that they believed God was going to send to make the world right again, to fix all the failure and the mess and the brokenness and the hurt and the sin that the world found itself stuck in. And the story of Christianity is that Jesus stands up and says, I'm the guy. I'm the guy. I'm the one that you've been waiting for, that God is going to send. Everything else about Jesus flows out of this idea that he is God's chosen one, sent to fix the mess that the world finds itself in. In part 2, we looked at Jesus the teacher. We said everyone knows that Jesus taught stuff about God. If you've never picked up a Bible, you kind of know that. And people who were there had all sorts of other people teaching them about God too, but they said there was something really different about the way Jesus taught about God. They said that he had a kind of understanding that other people didn't have. There was a kind of wisdom about the way Jesus taught that other people didn't have, and there was a kind of authority about the things that he said, about the things that he taught about God that other people didn't have. We dug into Jesus the teacher in part 2. Last week we talked about Jesus the miracle worker. And my guess is even if you've never picked up a Bible in your life, you've heard and could remember some of the miracle kind of stories of Jesus. You've probably heard stories about Jesus healing the blind and making the lame walk again. There was a story where Jesus turned water into wine. And that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? That's kind of, a lot of people go, I'll have that miracle again today. 3 times he raised someone from the dead. People who were there said Jesus walked on water once, literally walked across the surface of the sea. And we said last week that the miracles of Jesus are not party tricks. They're Jesus proving that he really is God's Messiah. That the miracles are Jesus saying, I'm the one, and here I'm going to prove it to you. And we said that the miracles that Jesus did are really pointing us toward and setting us up for the ultimate miracle, the resurrection of Jesus. So this week we're going to sort of take a slight turn, and we're going to talk about Jesus the rebel. Now, I get it, this is probably not the most obvious era, the most obvious part of who Jesus is. And my guess is actually when you hear me say Jesus the rebel, some of you are thinking yeah, right, wasn't Jesus perfect? Wasn't he a good guy? There's surely nothing rebellious about Jesus. Didn't he always do the right thing? Isn't he the nerd sitting at the front of the class who always has the right answer? Isn't that the picture of Jesus? And I guess the answer is, well, yeah, kind of, but Jesus was also a rebel. Now, usually when we use a word like rebel, usually we think of someone who's doing something bad or doing the wrong thing. But sometimes when the system is wrong, it takes a rebel to fight for what is right. 200 years ago, slavery was legal in this country. and in all countries across what was then called the British Empire. And it took a bunch of rebels to stand up and change the law and outlaw slavery. When I was a kid, I know not that long ago, when I was a kid, whaling was legal, and whales across the world were facing extinction, and it took a group of Greenpeace rebels to break the law, make everyone aware of what was going on, which eventually brought an end to whaling, largely an end to whaling, and saved whales across the world from extinction. I don't know if you thought about it, but even today we hear stories in the news sometime of big companies or corporations who are doing the wrong thing by their workers, ripping them off, or there's something going wrong, and it takes one voice, doesn't it? There's always a rebel somewhere inside the organisation who will stand up and say, this thing's wrong. It takes a rebel to stand up and make things right. We celebrate rebels like that, right? We give those sorts of rebels awards, we make movies about them. Those sorts of rebels make the world a better place. Sometimes when the system is wrong, it takes a rebel to fight for what is right. And Jesus was that kind of rebel. Jesus was born into a world that was full of rules about God. People have done this. If you count them through the Bible, there are 613 different rules about God. They cover everything. They had rules for almost every part of the way that you live. There were rules about what you could wear. There were rules about what you could eat. There were rules about when you could work and when you could pray. They had rules for how you could wear your hair. There were rules for what a woman could and couldn't do during her monthly period. Did you know that? True story. They had rules for that stuff. Yeah, true. 613 Jewish rules like that. And that's not counting any of the rules that the Roman Empire laid on people. Jesus is born into a world controlled by the Roman Empire. They had a whole nother layer of rules, pretty harsh rules, to keep people in check and make sure people did the right thing. Jesus lived in a world where you followed the rules or else. It wasn't cool being a rebel in Jesus' time. Bad things happened to people who rebelled in Jesus' time. Now, Matthew and Mark and Luke all wrote biographies of the life of Jesus. We call them the Gospels. These are the books you find in the Bible. And they all agree, all of them agree, it's right up there in the very front of each of their stories, that Jesus' opening message to the world was the kingdom of God has come. Jesus shows up and his opening message was, I'm starting a new kingdom. I'm setting up a new way of living. And that means there will be a whole new set of rules in this new kingdom. This is the language of a rebel. Now, the kingdom Jesus is talking about is not a new nation. He wasn't creating a new flag. There was no sort of land involved. He didn't raise an army. He didn't fight a war. Jesus never ran for parliament. The kingdom that Jesus is talking about is like a world within a world. A world within a world that worked according to God's rules for living. And Jesus laid down new rules for people who wanted to live in this kingdom. Listen to, this is just a selection. Here's some of the new rules that Jesus laid down. These are from Matthew chapter 5. Jesus said, you've heard that it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. That was a rule. Pretty good rule. But I tell you that anyone who's angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Another pretty good rule. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's the way the law used to work. If someone does something to you, you can do the same thing back to them. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. You've heard that it was said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy. It's the way the world worked. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. All those verses come from what we often call, if you read the Bible, the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know if you notice, but each part of that teaching starts the same way. It's Jesus saying, you have heard that it was said, something, 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 but I tell you. Jesus is taking existing laws and rules, he's taking the way things were, and he's saying, this is the way the world is, but I'm giving you a new rule. This is what everyone else is doing, but I'm showing you the new way to live in my new kingdom. You see what Jesus is doing? This is the language of rebellion. Jesus is deliberately breaking the existing rules and starting new rules for living. The world's all going this way, and Jesus says, but if you want to follow me, I'm going this way. Jesus was a rebel, and he came to start a rebellion. He didn't use guns, he didn't get an army together. Jesus started a rebellion with love and grace and forgiveness and kindness and generosity. Luke remembers this crazy day. He tells the story. This is Luke chapter 19. Jesus entered Jericho and he was passing through it. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. We've talked about this before. That meant Zacchaeus was a scumbag. Meant he stole, he lied, he cheated. Think about the sleaziest kind of business person that you can imagine in the world today. Times them by 100 and maybe you're somewhere close to the kind of low life that Zacchaeus was as far as everyone else was concerned. Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming through and there's a big crowd. Everyone wants to see this guy and hear the stuff that he's talking about. And Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus too, but he's short and he can't see over the crowd. And because of who Zacchaeus is, no one's letting him through. Do you know what I mean? Zacchaeus is the kind of guy when he says, I can get through, people sort of, they huddle up a little bit so he deliberately can't get through. So he runs ahead, he finds the biggest tree that he can, he climbs the tree so that he can see over the crowd and see Jesus. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up. He said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once. He welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and they began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. Zacchaeus is a sleazy liar and a cheat. No one likes Zacchaeus, but Jesus, the rebel, says, let's go back to your house for dinner. The crowd's got to be full of good people and nice people and important people and influential people, but yet Jesus chooses Zacchaeus for lunch. No one does that, right? That's not the way the world works. No one in that crowd chooses Zacchaeus. But that's the way Jesus' new kingdom works, right? And that choice changes Zacchaeus' life forever. Zacchaeus stood up and he said to the Lord, look, Lord, Here and now I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, which of course he has, that's what he does for a job, I will pay them back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to them, Today salvation has come to this house, because he's in Zacchaeus' house. Today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. In other words, he's in the kingdom. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. This is a story that breaks all the rules. All the rules about the way you should live, about the people you should hang out with, about what you should do to get right with God, all that sort of stuff, right? Luke is telling us this story. Luke includes this story in his biography of Jesus to show us what Jesus' new world and what Jesus' new rule looks like in real life. Luke is showing us Jesus the rebel. It's just one story. The Gospels, the stories of Jesus, they're full of stories like this, right? Full of stories where Jesus is constantly taking the social rules, he's constantly taking the way things were, he's constantly taking the things that people think should be right, and he flips them on their head. And here's the slightly awkward truth for us, is that lots of the things that Jesus said and did 2,000 years ago are still rebellious in our world today. So here's where it gets personal for you and me. If we want to follow Jesus, if you want to follow Jesus, you're going to have to be a little bit rebellious too. Because there are rules in our world today, right? I mean, we have laws, the official laws. We have laws that tell us where to drive on the road. We have laws to tell us how you can treat people. There's certain things you can do to people who annoy you and certain things you can't do to people who annoy you. We have laws about how much tax we pay. We have laws about where you can put your garbage, right? We have all sorts of laws. But there's a whole layer of other rules in our world too, aren't there? They're not laws that the police will chase you for, but they're unwritten rules. Unwritten rules that control the way we treat one another, the way we see one another, the way the world works. Rules that tell us what sort of behaviour is good, what sort of behaviour is bad, what sort of behaviour is in, and what sort of behaviour is out. I mean, we have unwritten rules about the sorts of people that you should try and be friends with. Right? Good people, cool people, kind people, wealthy, influential people, they're all in. Criminals, drug addicts, homeless people, they're generally out, right? And some of us have other people on our out list, don't we? For some of us, people who vote differently for us, they're out. For some of us, people who have a different sexual orientation to us, they're out. For some of us, people who have different religious beliefs or that believe really strongly different things about climate change or other things, they're out. Let's be honest, there are people in our world today who will look at the colour of someone's skin and decide that that person's out. If you're following Jesus the rebel, be prepared for a different set of rules. Because in Jesus' world, everybody's in. We have unwritten rules about money and what you can do with it. You earned it, it's yours, you can do with it whatever you like. You look after yourself and you look after your family first and people closest to you first. And if you've got any left over, you can give it to someone if you want, if you think they deserve it. If you're following Jesus, be prepared to live by different rules. In Jesus' world, you give to God first. You go crazy generous with the rest. and then you trust God to look after everything else. It's a whole different way of seeing money, right? We have unwritten rules about what you can do and what you should do with people who hurt you or are mean to you or sometimes just plain out annoy you, right? I mean, the first rule is that you get to decide what is mean behaviour from someone else, right? We all get to decide that for ourselves. You get to look at someone on social media, you get to look at someone in traffic, and you get to decide who's right and who's wrong. That's the first rule. And generally the rules go something like this, that you can give people a second chance if they hurt you or they're mean to you or they annoy you. But after that, you can cancel them, that's okay, right? You can give them one chance, but after that, they're gone. Oh, and then of course, at that point, if they've hurt you more than a couple of times, then it's okay to tell everyone else about how bad they are and you know, you can do that, that's okay. Like, that's the rules, right? If you're following Jesus the rebel, you better be prepared to live by a different set of rules. Because in Jesus' world, it's forgive and forgive again and forgive again and keep forgiving. It's love the people who hurt you. Even if they don't ask for it, even if they don't deserve it. There's just a couple of examples, right? But what I want you to see is that Jesus is living a crazy, rebellious life. That the whole world's going this way, and Jesus says, in my kingdom we go this way. Jesus created a new set of rules for living that were different from the way that everyone else lives, and they're still different from the way that the world lives today. And for us, following Jesus means joining his rebellion and living by his rules. Following Jesus means living differently to the world around you. And of course, by the way, and this is where it gets a little bit hairy, you know what happened to Jesus the rebel, right? The people who make the rules and keep the rules, they don't like rebels, do they? They didn't like the way Jesus was breaking the rules, and so they killed him. A lot of people don't know that, but that's actually the reason that Jesus was crucified. I mean, we think about there's a greater spiritual reason. We're going to talk about that next week. But fundamentally, in the moment, Jesus was crucified because the religious leaders, the people who made and kept the rules, really didn't like the way he was breaking the rules. And that's why he was crucified. Now, I'm not trying to scare you, but if you're going to follow Jesus, you better be prepared for some pushback, right? Now, I have to tell you, making a decision to follow Jesus is the best decision you can make in your life, 100%. Jesus will lead you into a life of peace and joy and contentment and freedom from sin, like in a way that nothing else in your life can take you into that place, right? It's 100% worth it. But you have to be a little bit of a rebel to get there. You have to be prepared to break some rules to get there. And you have to be prepared for some people who don't like people who break the rules. Like I said, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. But I just want you to understand who Jesus was. We don't talk about this part of Jesus so much, you know. I mean, often we talk about Jesus as the nice, friendly, warm guy. You know, Jesus is the best friend that you want to hang out with all the time. He's the guy that you want to have over for a movie night. And Jesus is all that. But Jesus came to start something new. He came to launch a whole new way of living. He came to launch a world within this world that runs differently to the way the world around it runs. We live in a world that's all about me first. We live in a world that runs on greed and anger and revenge and celebrates us versus them. And if you don't believe me, you just watch what's going to happen in this country in the next month leading up to a federal election, right? And I'm blaming someone else. We're all going to be in that, you know? Jesus came to start a new world in this world, a different way of living with a different set of rules. In Jesus' world, it's about God first and others first. It's a world that runs on love and joy and peace and sacrifice and generosity and forgiveness. And you're invited to join Jesus in this world. Right? This is Jesus' basic message, is you're invited to join him in this rebellion. You're invited to be part of this crazy new world. At least it's a world that looks crazy to the way everyone else does life, right? People who follow Jesus and follow his rules for living are going to look a little bit crazy. They're going to look a little bit rebellious to people around them. But Jesus' message is it's absolutely worth it. I mean, Jesus following rebels have changed the world. They've ended slavery. They've started schools and hospitals. They've fed the poor. They've healed the sick. They've brought joy and peace and purpose to the lost and lonely. And Jesus' invitation is, do you want a life that's full of meaning and purpose and adventure? Do you want to do something that's significant with your life, like really significant? You know, something that actually makes a difference to you and to people around you. Jesus is inviting you to be part of this rebellion. This church at Tide, we're inviting you to join us and be part of this rebellion. That's kind of where this message ends. That's where Jesus, the rebel, ends. It ends with an invitation to say, well, this is who Jesus was. This is where he's going. Do you want to come? Right? Do you want to join the journey? That's why the sign up here says that we want to be people who are living our lives following Jesus' example and teaching wherever we are, no matter the cost, because we recognise what this rebellion looks like. That's what the sign up the front is talking about. It's an invitation to say, do you want to be a part of this with us? Do you want to join the rebellion and follow Jesus? Because sometimes when the system is wrong, it takes a rebel to fight for what is right.